What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another special edition of SSPN. I'm Jude, that's Ethan, but it's not just us today, as you guys see in the title. We got Chris from Spurs Spotlight in here as well. And man, we're so excited to have you. I mean, we can just jump right into things. Honestly, man, I'm not sure where to start, but first of all, just tell people a little bit about your channel, just how you became a Spurs fan and everything like that. Just anybody who maybe hasn't seen your content and doesn't know you, tell them a little bit about you.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank y'all for having me. I have been watching for a little while now, so it's just an honor to be on a channel like y'all, someone who I actually respect and enjoy watching. So, first of all, thank y'all. But Spurs Spotlight, I host the Spurs Spotlight, obviously, where we just go over the recent news, rumors, and often from time to time, give y'all my opinion on what I think the Spurs should do or just my overall thoughts on the team, which we'll be doing here today. So, I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And if you guys, if you don't have all the time to scroll through all the Twitter rumors or the X rumors, whatever you want to call it, go to Chris's channel because he'll get it all covered for you. He'll give you all the details in a nice little 10-minute video, man. So I really love what you do. I love the breakdowns, and it's not super time consuming as well. So I think a lot of people who may not have a ton of time in their day to follow all that, check out his content, man, and you can get updated. But let's jump right into just the Spurs, man. As you kind of see with the titled this episode "State of the Spurs," because we just wanted to get somebody other than ourselves who's also a Spurs fan, kind of their opinions on things. So, man, there's so many things that we could jump into, but if you're cool with this, Chris, we'll kind of just start with the roster and kind of go position by position, if that's cool with you, just to get your
Yeah.
perspective. So we'll start with point guard. We got De'Aaron Fox and Blake Wesley there as of right now. Obviously, the draft is approaching, and that could definitely add another big name in there. But what is your thoughts on the Spurs point guard position just as of right now?
You know, I know people say that we have a lot of guards in general, but I actually don't think so. You said De'Aaron Fox and Blake Wesley. I actually think that's why we should add someone like a Dylan Harper, and not to get too ahead of what we're going to talk about, but I think having a solid six-man point guard, because I don't know how y'all feel about Blake Wesley as of right now, but I don't know if that's someone who I would necessarily trust to be thrown out there and be the backup point guard as of right now, especially when the Spurs are going to go ahead and try to make a playoff push. So I think that we could definitely use a little bit more help, especially in the backup point guard, and get De'Aaron Fox a little bit more rest, so he don't have to play a whole 48 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan, and anytime you want to jump in with some of this, you
Yeah.
can. But I'll just with that being said, we can move on to the shooting guard position as well. Let me pull up the little graphic we got here. So Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and Malachi Branham there. What are your thoughts on those three guys?
Okay, so the two guard, you have a little bit more of depth with Devin Vassell, Steph Castle. I don't know where Steph Castle will be starting next season. If you want to play Devin Vassell at the two, maybe scoot Steph Castle over to the three. But overall, we could just use more depth in general. I think you can never have too many good players on your roster. I like Malachi Branham. I know people have some questions about him. We don't use him to his strengths necessarily. He is a pick and roll type of guy, and we have him spotting up at times. So I think we could be a little bit better utilizing him. But we got to get a little bit more out of his defense. So, but the shooting guards, I think we should be pretty good for that.
So, do you think you would extend Malachi Branham or pick up his player? Excuse me. What option does he have?
I
Team
think it's
option.
yeah.
Yeah. Would you pick up his team option?
Yeah, I think so. I think just for right now, and this, I kind of changed my opinion. Before, I was more of a Blake Wesley type of guy,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like for this team, people are already questioning like the shooting, especially if you take a Dylan Harper.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if there's an odd man out between Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley, it may be a hot take, but I would rather go with Malachi Branham just because of the shooting, even though his defense isn't all there.
Mm. That is a hot
Interesting.
take. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jude knows I'm a Blake Wesley stan. He's my guy. I agree with what you said earlier, though. I don't think he's necessarily ready for a 6-man, ball dominant role off the bench as our primary backup point guard. So I'm with that. Uh, but I think I would take him over Malachi, at least right now. But it comes down to taste. But I do agree with what you said. I also don't think we've been using Malachi to his strengths either. Um, I just think in spot minutes, when given the opportunity, Blake performed a little bit better than Malachi this past season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also you saw like whenever Blake got the minutes, his jump shot was falling a little bit more than usual. We
A little
saw a
bit.
little bit of improvement in his jump shot. So I mean, if he could keep that going, if he could be a little bit more reliable in that aspect, I could see why you would take Blake Wesley. I'm not
Mhm.
mad at that.
Right.
Yeah, and with Malachi, I think you bring up a lot of good points there. Obviously, I would say probably out of everybody on the team this year, he was probably like, I guess you could say, the most forgotten about, or probably kind of like the least talked about. I know we kind of saw some spurts there at the end of the season, and obviously had some really good spurts at the end of his rookie season, which was reminiscent of how he finished the year off at Ohio State, which is why he
Yeah.
worked himself, into becoming, I think, on a lot of big boards at that point. He was even in the lottery. Obviously, he didn't get picked until 20. But that was a big reason why he was ranked where he was ranked. So,
Mhm.
obviously, just with the nature of the Spurs, bringing in De'Aaron Fox, Wemby's ascension, Stephon Castle's ascension, we got the number 2 pick again. This draft is absolutely loaded. Again, he's kind of the forgotten about player, but I still think that you brought up some good points there. As despite all of the valid criticisms, I think there's
Mhm.
also some criticisms that you could make about the positions that he was put in on the floor. And was that really to his strength? Why were we trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we, not to get too, um, into the weeds here, but I think we talked about this like the last couple of years, really, when you start thinking about our trajectory when we drafted Victor. It's like at a certain point, the excuses and like who we actually keep on long term, some hard decisions are going to have to be made. And I think this offseason is one of those moments. Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, two names that a lot of people are talking about right now. Are they going to be on the team? Will it be just one of them? So it's times like this, and then Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, their expiration in a way, it's starting to get thinner and thinner as we look toward a playoff push.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can jump into small forwards here, Chris. So we got Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, and Julian Champagnie.
Mm.
Yeah, Harrison Barnes, if you want to put him at 4 or 3, I think he could play either or. Obviously, people talk about that's the missing piece for the Spurs core. They need a wing. I think that's the biggest probably hole in the team, despite the backup center. And so, if with that 14th pick, you for sure want to take a wing. If you do, I know there have been rumors about the Spurs looking to trade for an elite wing, Kevin Durant, Giannis, if you want to put him at the 3 or whatever. So I think that's a position where the Spurs are going to have to address. Obviously, you have Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, who are good backup wings, but you're for sure going to need a starting wing to go with this core and build along for the future.
Mm. Are you on team, let's just cut Keldon Johnson and say goodbye, or are you on team, he's better than most people give him credit for?
That was kind of a question I was going to ask y'all, but for me, going into last season, I had him being the Spurs 6th man of the year, and I think he showed a lot of good stuff with him being top 3 or top 5 in points off the bench. So I actually do like Keldon Johnson, especially post All-Star break. We saw him be pretty efficient in his role, and obviously you want to see that with Wemby and Fox whenever the team is all there together. But I actually do like Keldon Johnson. I don't think you should just get rid of him. I think he provides a lot of good stuff. And I think the Spurs actually think he's pretty valuable. They didn't give him up in the Fox trade, so they're going to try to hold on to him for sure.
Because we're doing this, Ethan, I got to put you on the screen so we can have the signed Keldon Johnson jersey.
You can see my
And
cat in my disgusting bed.
yeah, I hadn't seen that part, Ethan. My
You
bad
outed me,
there.
bro. You outed me. I have all
Look,
my crap pushed up over
my
there.
mine's over here and it looks the same way. Um,
We're in the
but
same boat.
but
Well,
in
while we're
regard,
on that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut
no,
you off.
go
I wanted
ahead,
to ask
please.
y'all. So, where do y'all rank like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson for the long term? Like, how do y'all feel about them long term wise?
Can I just say too, this was a discussion I wanted to get into with you. And I think it's because like I think, we're diehard Spurs fans. So like
Yeah.
we watch these guys and we try to look for the good. It's not just okay, there's a couple of missed shots or a bad game here or there. We just throw them away like we're trash. Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not, again, that's not to be like elitist or arrogant or anything. I think that's just kind of how we view it. Yeah, what I would say, man, I definitely think that Ethan and I's opinion of them in the sense of their long-term potential has probably changed a little bit. Obviously, when you bring in Victor, that's going to happen for everybody on the roster. So that's a key point of context. But I guess what I would say, I think I think they get too much crap. And I get that they're getting to 25, you know what I mean? Like, and after a certain point, when you see the same thing, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, are they going to improve? Is this just what they are? But I just feel like in the past couple seasons, and I understand the other side of this where people say there's excuses, but I just feel like there's so many different points of context that you can point to in each of the last 3 seasons that like just had a lot to do with, you could say, some of their mishaps or, I mean, even some of their successes. If you want to go back to the 2022 season when Keldon Johnson averaged 22 points, you know. Um, so I guess what I'm getting at there, like I said, my bottom line, I just think they get too much crap. I'm not completely out on them. Now, what I will say, if you would have asked me a year ago, like I think I'm way more willing to trade those guys than I was a year ago. And I don't want to get too ahead of things here, but like when we bring up the Kevin Durant trade, you made a video about that. Ethan and I, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, how maybe that would be more appealing because the price tag would be way lower than Giannis. I will say I'm more open to including those guys in a deal like that, but also it's because of the value. Like you've got to match value. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't think those are invaluable or non-valuable guys that we're trading. And I think with what like DeJounte is probably not the best example. But again, you could even point to like there's some things there. Like if he doesn't tear his ACL this year, maybe he looks a lot better in New Orleans, and we view him in a different way. That's besides the point. To wrap all of this up, what I'm trying to get to is like with your guy Derek White, we were talking about him a little bit more pre-stream. I think these guys, even if they do get traded, I think people will start to view them a little bit differently because they won't be just in the specific Spurs situation that they're in. And they might be able to show more because that's another thing. It's hard to describe, but in a sense, the Spurs system, can kind of limit numbers. And then
Oh yeah.
when people go off the numbers, you know what I mean? That can give them like a false view of a player. That's my diatribe on Devin and Keldon.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's all, perspective, and I think Jude hit it right on the head, right? It's when we didn't have Wemby and we were one of the worst teams in the league, and these guys were fresh and new to the team. It was like, okay, they're going to be all-stars, they're going to be Hall of Famers. That was our mindset around them, and I think that's been the case since I was 11 years old. I thought Brandon Paul was going to be an all-star, and I thought Bryn Forbes had 27 at like 20 years old. We thought he was going to be the next one. I thought Danny Green would be an all-star because he had the three-point record in the playoffs, right? They have moments and flashes when they're so young, and then you pay them. And now we're at a different point with Victor. We're like, okay, we're ready to win. And their numbers are lower, like Jude said, because of the system, because of the situations that they're in. And then injuries as well for guys like Devin Vassell. And I think they're good players. I like them a lot. I think if I put them head-to-head as far as how I value them after this season, I'd probably give Keldon a leg up, which is not where I was last year or even at the beginning of the year. I just think Devin, because of his style of play and the money that he's making and kind of where we think he can be, he underperformed more so than Keldon. And when push came to shove and Victor was out, Keldon stepped up and Devin kind of continued to be a little bit inconsistent. I'm still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because I think at his ceiling, he's definitely a better player than Keldon Johnson, and then they can both be contributors. But I think I'm with Jude, where it's like if the right trade came along, like absolutely you have to include them at this point. But I'm not a hater either. I don't think that they're just trash players on trash contracts. I actually think their contracts are really nice for what they're able to provide.
Yeah, like you said, hyping up your players. I thought Devin Vassell would be an all-star. I thought
Mhm.
I thought we were going to see some of that this season, and obviously with him not being able to have a full offseason with the foot injury and stuff, that stuff does play into a part. So that's why I think I was kind of one of the people who gave Devin Vassell like, okay, this is going to be his down year. I'm not going to like rip into him too much. I'm just going to give him this season. And then so looking forward to next season, that's really where I want to see guys like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, where they can really fit with this team. And
For
then
sure.
after that, you can maybe make a playoff run. You could see who fits and who gets played off the floor. And then you can make a move according from there.
I can buy that.
Yeah.
Not to just agree with you on everything, Chris, but I'm totally with that. And that's the thing. Like, not everybody is Wemby and Steph. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not everybody's just going to come in and be elite immediately. Some guys don't really like turn into their prime until they're like 26, 27, you know? And obviously those aren't all-star level guys usually. But again, that's kind of, you know, how we've pivoted and we've started to view these guys. But I agree with what Ethan said there, kind of at the end of the year, as crazy as it sounds. I think I'd lean a little bit with Keldon too, just with the way that his role went. But the bottom line, though, with what you were saying, Chris, I think next season is really like, okay, put up or shut up time, if you will. You know what I mean? And if these same inconsistencies and the same thing happens, you know what I mean? You know, then at that point, I'll just be like, okay, I think I've seen enough to say that they're inconsistent. You know what I mean? But as of right now, again, and especially like we didn't even really get to see the team with De'Aaron Fox. That's the other thing too. So again, and that's without mentioning all of the injuries that Devin went through. And I know people can say, okay, well, is he injury prone? That's a whole nother discussion. And you could even, we've heard people say that with Jeremy. Now I'm going off on a little bit of a rant, if y'all will let me, because I was looking up some of these numbers, okay, like on Jeremy Sohan's career games played like per season. And he's played at least 50 to sometimes 60 games every year, and I'm not, people could be like, okay, well, that's 20 or, 30 games, out so. And I think there's even one season in there where he did play 72. I say all this to say, Lauri Markkanen, who a lot of people in the past have clamored, for trade rumors and stuff. He's only played like 40 games a year, 40, 50, but it's not, he's just an example I'm kind of pulling out of left field. There's other like Aaron Gordon, for example, which is kind of who we, potentially could look at as a comp, for Jeremy Sohan's role long term. He's played like 50 games every year, but are they playing in the playoffs? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Most NBA players, especially as Spurs fans, we should know this. Like we literally started resting people, our stars specifically. Like go look at Tim Duncan's, like I forget what it was. I think Manu only played 80 games once in his career, like anyways. So that's my rant about kind of injury prone stuff. But I think that kind of ties into like, Devin as well. And again, if that's the story every season, multiple years in a row, then that's a different discussion. But anyways.
Good point.
Alrighty, Chris. We'll move to the front court here. This is pretty simple. I know you can throw Harrison in there as well for sure. But Jeremy Sohan and Victor Wembanyama. And also just what are your thoughts on, how we're going to approach fixing this front court depth?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I think Harrison Barnes would be more of a four. So you would have Jeremy Sohan, Harrison Barnes. I wish we could bring back Mamu. I don't think we will because I do think some team will throw him a bag after that New York game where he had 30 something. So for sure, you got to look into fixing that through the draft. Maybe if you can see some free agents that can move and play the four. There's not many because, people don't go into free agency nowadays. So it would probably have to be through like a trade. Nas Reed is one of them. I know people like Nas Reed a lot. I don't know how realistic that is because I think he will get paid by the Timberwolves. And so maybe you get a Rasheer Fleming or a Carter Bryant to slide up there into that four. But you're definitely going to have to look into some people on the trading block for sure. Do y'all have any people who y'all would like to slide into that for?
I think at this point, Jude and I will just take anybody that's physical
Yeah,
and can help Victor and Jeremy kind of control the paint a little bit more. Did you, as like we were constantly criticizing the fact that the Spurs didn't want to play
Oh
a
yeah.
7 foot tall guy? Did you also get that feeling watching this season?
Yeah, for sure. Whenever we signed Bismack Biyombo, I was like, okay, he's gonna get it. He's gonna get some PT next game. And then Mitch don't play him. He puts Sohan at the 5, and I'm like, Mitch, come on, what are we doing? And he's like, it's counterintuitive because teams shoot a lot of threes, and so the ball is gonna bounce further out. So we don't really need a big man out there. And I didn't agree with it, but I guess we got to roll with that. But I was definitely frustrated. We didn't play a big man, but we didn't also have one to
I
until
mean,
we
we
got
had
Bismack.
Bismack.
Yeah, until we
For a
got
while, we
Bismack.
didn't
Yeah.
play Bismack. We were like clamoring every game, like, is this the one? And eventually, he did play, and I think he played well enough to maybe get the third string spot. But we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, he was solid.
Yeah, and another thing, just on the point with Mitch Johnson there, I think another aspect of that they're not going to say publicly is maybe they were trying to increase their draft odds as much as possible, considering their best two players were out. And even, and shortly after that comment, Sohan got shut down for the season as well. So,
He
Yeah,
did.
for sure. There were some times where I point to the Miami Heat game where Bam Adebayo hit the game winner. You have Jeremy Sohan on the bench, but you have Chris Paul and Keldon Johnson guarding Bam Adebayo for the game. And I was like, why would Sohan not be out there at a time like this? So it had to be a soft tank. There's no way the Spurs would have kept Mitch around if that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, for us though, actually watch the Spurs. It was a pretty hard tank. I think
Yeah.
that they just get a pass because nobody cares.
Yeah.
well, we talked a little bit about Mitch there. Me and Ethan talked about how, we kind of wanted the Spurs to go, look for a big fish, just when it came to coaching names because of all of the appeal in Wemby and everything like that. And also Stephon, of course, can't forget him, and De'Aaron. It's like, I don't want to forget all these different guys that we have on the squad because, like I said, obviously Steph's rookie of the year. And then De'Aaron, I feel like sometimes gets forgotten about just because of the way that the season went. Shoot. Okay. Yeah. Matt, back to Mitch Johnson. So what were your thoughts when you heard that news, and you saw the press conference and everything like that? Because, as much as we said that, I think we always had the caveat. We're like, now if the Spurs just come out and they say, hey, it's going to be Mitch Johnson, we're going to elevate him. Like, we're going to trust in those guys, over our own judgment. And I definitely felt a lot better kind of after hearing, Pop talk about him. But what were your thoughts on, the hiring of Mitch Johnson and just kind of his journey to get to that position?
Yeah, when the season ended, I was like, all right, the interim is gone. We're not gonna have to deal with that anymore. We'll have Michael Malone or Taylor Jenkins come and take over. But after hearing the news, I was like, okay, this makes sense. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Uh, for camaraderie rise, Wemby, he was working out with Mitch Johnson. The guys all know Mitch Johnson. He was on the bench for almost 10 years. And so I think it does make sense. But then you also have the Spurs having to talk to Wemby. You're not going to get a new head coach without going to your franchise player and saying, are you okay with this? Like, obviously, they had their plans in the beginning, but Wemby co-signs that. And so I was comfortable with it after hearing it. I was like, okay, it makes a little bit of sense. And then just the experience he's had, like I said, he has been working with the Spurs for almost 10 years now. So I'm comfortable with it now. But at first, I was a little shooken up, but then I was like, okay, this is probably the right move.
Mm.
It's a real Spurs move too. After you think about it,
Right.
like they're not going to go and find somebody else who doesn't know the program as much as Mitch Johnson. So yeah.
Yeah, and me and Ethan have talked about this question, but I'll just dish it to you, man. Do you think, I'm sure, I kind of feel like I already know the answer to this question, but how long do you think Mitch Johnson's leash is? Let me put it that way.
Probably about 3 years. I'd give him a solid 3 years because him being a first year coach, when they go into the playoffs, I feel like he's bound to get out coached at least once. So you're gonna have to give him this year and see what he can do. Next season, they're gonna be expected to take a deep playoff push. And after that, if he's not getting the job done, you're gonna have to look at some other options because you don't want to frustrate Wemby and have another situation where he wants out. So his leash is definitely not as long as like a Popovich. I don't think anyone would have a leash like Pop. Like, you're not going to fire Popovich. So it's definitely different, but I'd give it a solid 3 years.
I know there's a lot left in the offseason as far as free agency, trades, draft, but right now, as the team stands, the current roster, if we don't make the playoffs next year, do you think he's gone?
Okay, well, when you say that, he might be gone if you don't make the playoffs because, well, if you said if the roster stays the same, right? If we don't go
Let's
and get a,
assume we get, we're going to get Derek Harper and Rasheer Fleming. And
you get a
then
backup big man.
let's say you get one like Steven Adams, like some like
Okay,
old
okay.
backup center that's probably not going to play that much.
If you fill in those gaps a little bit, even if it is a Steven Adams, and you still don't make the playoffs, I don't think they fire him right then and there because I don't think the Spurs really move like that. I still say you give him at least one more year, but he's got to make something shake after that. If you're not one of the top 6 seeds after not making the playoffs next season, then I think he's gone for sure.
Gotcha.
I think that's really realistic. I think that was a great question there as well, Ethan. And this kind of leads me into another question that I had. And I was watching one of your videos today, and you kind of talked about it a little bit. So again, I think I might already know the answer to this, but just what are your thoughts on team building long term? Like, do you want to just go full Thunder? Do you think that maybe even in a couple of years would be a better time to bring in a trade? Like, I guess my question is, there's all these storylines about trading for an all-star, whether it's this year or in the future because of Wemby's appeal and all these people, potentially wanting to play with him. But then you've also got long-term depth and building a championship team. So I guess what are your thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts on how the Spurs should build long term?
Where the Spurs are at right now, I don't think there's a definitive wrong way to go. It'll be really hard to mess up what the Spurs have going on right now. I think my least favorite option would be like going all in for a Giannis. Like in my video today, I talked about Kevin Durant, and I think that would be more of something that I would like because although it is a win now situation, you wouldn't have to drain all your capital and all your young guys to acquire a Kevin Durant. So I think he fits a little bit better. He's a good shooter. He's a plug and play type of player. And so Kevin Durant would probably be my second option, but my first option would be to just go full like OKC and build through the draft, continue on because you have a lot of flexibility. You can make a lot of things shake, and you got to see where the team's at. Like we haven't been in the playoffs, so if you can get to the playoffs with this team and then make a decision, I think that would probably be the best option.
What's your realistic expectation as far as seeding? Kind of assuming that the big names kind of stay where they are, at least in the West.
So I think their floor is probably the 9th seed, but I do think their ceiling, like if everything goes right, they could possibly be like a 3 seed. So my prediction would probably be right in the middle, 6 seed. You barely get out of that play-in, but I do think they will be a pretty good team next season, hopefully.
My hope is that they have a similar season to what Detroit had this past year, where they kind of catch some people slipping, maybe some key veteran signings like a Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr. that aren't world beaters, but kind of get you over that hump, but ultimately lose.
Yeah, it would help a little bit more if we were in the East like Detroit, but
For sure.
yeah.
I mean, we might have freaking been in the play-in this year,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
despite the soft tank if we were in the East. So,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, I'll say I like what you said there, Chris. Just to throw out something else, I really think kind of that 4 to like 7 range, is probably the sweet spot for us next season. I really hope we could get into the 6th seed though. It's funny that you mentioned like that kind of right in the middle, because if you had to like say like gun to my head right now, May 28th, I would say 6th seed.
Yeah.
And I really hope that that's the case, like you said, so we can get out of the play-in. And then on top of that, that goes to Ethan's point, because I believe not the Sixers. I was thinking red, white, and blue. The Pistons were the 6th seed as well this year. So yeah, that I completely agree with what Ethan said there as well.
Do you think, this is kind of an off-topic question, but kind of go back to point guards, do you think De'Aaron Fox, with his injury being healed over the summer, having a full training camp, do you think he can get back to all-star level numbers with the Spurs next to Wemby?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think if the Spurs are winning, he's healthy. I think he could possibly be all NBA third team. I mean, he dropped 60 with a torn ligament in his hand. So I think the sky is the limit. He's never played with a player like Wemby. I mean, Domantas Sabonis is good, but he's not Wemby. The way Victor Wembanyama can really stretch out the floor, like people are jumping out at him at half court. And to have De'Aaron Fox be able to get 2 feet in the paint whenever, and then you have to choose and pick your poison between the 7'5" demigod or De'Aaron Fox, how fast he is. I think the sky is the limit for De'Aaron Fox, especially being in San Antonio for this upcoming season.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on De'Aaron's shooting? Because I see a lot of skepticism in that, and I'm not trying to come out and say he's Steph Curry, but again, it's kind of like with the Devin and Keldon thing. I think he gets a little bit too much crap for that, and I also would like to, like you said, he both of not only were there two like torn finger ligaments, but they were in his shooting hand. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. I think he's going to be a solid shooter. Obviously, like you said, he's not going to be Steph Curry, but I would dare a team to leave De'Aaron Fox open. Like no one is going to just let him shoot all day, every day, even if he's having an off game. Clutch player of the year before he can really do it all. He's becoming a 3-level scorer, and I think we're going to see more of his 3-point game now that he has a Victor Wembanyama, and he's going to be seeing doubles, and that's going to give De'Aaron Fox some shots that he maybe hasn't seen before. So he's going to get a lot of open shots, and I think we will see a solid shooting season from De'Aaron Fox, probably one of his best.
Mm. Love it.
yeah. Go ahead.
While we're on point guards, are you pro or anti trying to bring back Chris Paul, assuming he even wants to come back?
Well, so Ethan, I don't know if you've been able to see this. Chris, if you want to let him know, because I saw you made a video about this recently.
Yeah, that basically answers the question. I did just make a video about that like 2 days ago or so. I said that you would have to let Chris Paul go if you get a Dylan Harper, because I would rather Dylan Harper come off the bench in the beginning. And because he needs the ball in his hands, you could let him run that second unit and really see what he can do with the ball in his hands, and maybe mesh and stagger some of the main guys' minutes with Dylan Harper so he could learn a little bit. But I would like to have him take over the Chris Paul role, or what we thought Chris Paul was going to do, because he never came off the bench, although we did want him to. So
Right.
I would think you choose Dylan Harper and let Chris Paul go.
Yeah, and the other thing too, there, Ethan. I think it was Mark Stein as well as Jonathan Givony. You can correct me on any of this, Chris. They both kind of came out and said that it seems like Chris Paul is going to be looking elsewhere, and that's kind of because of the fact that the Spurs are indicating to other teams that they're going to probably draft Dylan.
I see.
But
Yeah.
if that were, go ahead.
Yeah, it makes sense, because Chris Paul has always said like the biggest thing with him at this stage of his career is playing. And so if you have a Dylan Harper, you gotta choose between the two, and I'm taking Dylan Harper.
Yeah. That's almost kind of similar to when Tony left. I'm just thinking about that in my head right now, because that was kind of when DeJounte came in, and there was kind of the whole, locker room thing with that, with him asking Tony to come off the bench and stuff. So,
Right.
but we kind of went through the whole roster there, man. I know we talked a little bit about KD and Giannis as well, and I just want to pull this up again, because even if you have, Harrison Barnes at the 4 there, you're probably going to have to give up a Devin Vassell or a Keldon Johnson in that KD trade if that were to happen. So I think he would really kind of address that wing spot that you kind of talked about, that's such a big need for the Spurs. And that also allows you, if you take a Carter Bryant at 14, then he can develop a little bit in Austin, you know what I mean? And he doesn't have to be forced in, to the backup rotation. Obviously, a Rasheer Fleming is a great option as well that we've kind of talked about, who'd be a little bit more play now ready. He's 21 and not, not a true freshman coming out of college. So that could, kind of mitigate that as well. But I really think another appeal of the KD trade, and you could say the same thing. Well, you can't say the same thing with the Giannis trade, because you're going to have to give up way more. So with the KD trade, you can kind of keep that depth while also kind of filling a need as well. On top of the fact that, I would assume he'd probably accept the player option in his second year, just because it is like $53 million. But it's still, not only is it shorter, but it's still like $10 million cheaper than Giannis's, which gets up into the 60s.
Yeah, and looking at the roster, I think a low-key kind of X factor would be Riley Minix. You're talking about Austin. I would like to see him get a little bit of PT, even if it's not a lot, just somewhere he could spot up and maybe knock down some shots. I think he could probably do a little bit of damage if he gets in the game.
Hmm. I like that. That's that. What he had a game where he had like 5 minutes and 12 points or something like that. Yeah, bro's an absolute bucket. I wouldn't mind giving him some
Yeah,
spot minutes from time to time.
And he's got some size and length to him too. I
He
want to say
does.
he's like almost 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range. So you could even theoretically, I mean, I'm not saying this is what the Spurs should do next season, but he has some versatility where you could even play him at the small ball four if you want
Hmm.
as well.
I got
yeah. I don't know
four.
his exact. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know his
No, you're good.
exact height or length. How tall is he?
I want to say he's 6'7", 6'8". I could be wrong, but let me look it up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
get him some
confirming.
minutes. Yeah,
Let's
Let me
see.
see here. Yeah, they list him at 6'7", 230 on ESPN.
He's a good size.
yeah, that's solid.
Let's see what yeah, that's what the NBA site says as well. So alrighty. Well, we kind of, like I said, we pretty much went over everything for the team. Chris, I know you had some questions. So if there's, we're going to kind of get into the offseason next and the draft and all that stuff we haven't discussed and get your thoughts on it. But if you have any questions right now that kind of fit into the team or just that you want to throw at us that you had, we can kind of do that right now before we get into the other stuff.
Well, I know I answered it, but what is y'all's ideal or realistic move going into the offseason, whether it be a KD, a Giannis, or building through the draft?
For me, it would be just staying pat with 2 and 14, drafting those two guys. And there are some small names in the veteran free agency market that I've been keeping an eye on. I don't know if this is a topic that we're going to get into later, Jude. I can save it if you think I should.
Nah, just go for it.
Okay. And a couple of these are unrealistic. I think if Andre Drummond declines his player option, he's a name I would love to bring to the Spurs. Malik Beasley, his contract has ended as well. He just had like a 6-man of the year candidacy with Detroit. So I don't know if he'll maybe have to be overpaid, but he's a wing 3D guy that I would love to bring on. Uh, and then the last name was Chris Boucher, who could be available as well. Just kind of a lengthy 4-5 combo that can also stretch the floor. I think those are some names that you could bring onto this team today, along with the drafted guys, and really make a push for a top 5 seed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think if I had to do it my way, I would do the same thing. I guess my dream really would be to get Nas Reed. I'm with you. Everybody's talking about that like it's a for sure thing. I think Winky agrees too in the background. Winky's really excited about the free agents. No, but there's a little bit of me that's an LSU fan, so there's that connection to Nas Reed, but also just he's a backup center who's modern and can stretch the floor. You know what I mean? He really would be a good fit on any team in the NBA. But with that being said, I think the Timberwolves have built a pretty good core. And you were talking about camaraderie earlier. I think they have a good bit of that with their culture and chemistry. So I don't really think he wants to leave Minnesota. But if for some reason he did, that would be like my dream free agency signing. But again, I'm kind of with you. Everybody's been saying that, so I'm kind of like hopping on the bandwagon. But I really don't have it that much faith in it being realistic. I honestly think, like I know we mentioned Steven Adams just kind of for fun, but somebody like in that mold or like Andre Drummond that Ethan mentioned, just some sort of center, man. Just get us a backup center who's physical, just run, jump, and dunk. I don't need anything crazy. Just like give me like if Bismack is the light version of what we want in the backup center, just give me the medium version. I don't need an all-star. Like just give me somebody like who can get some boards, play some good interior defense, and get the guys some extra possessions.
Yeah, and they let go of Cat too, so I don't think you let Cat and Nasrid go or without making some fans pretty angry. So I think Nasrid will for sure be back at the Timberwolves.
Hmm.
That's a really good point. But yeah, I'd go with 2 and 14 and just kind of address those needs there. Dylan Harper at number 2, and then, one of like a Rasheer Fleming or Carter Bryant, or, maybe we make some other sort of move and trade back for another center we like. Even Thomas Sorber is another name that's kind of been thrown out there in that range. So that's what I would want to do if I was Brian Wright. But again, I trust there. If I wake up one morning to a KD trade notification, like I'm gonna have faith in it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brian Wright should definitely, when the Spurs are winning, he'll get some pop for executive of the year. I think he'll be up there in that conversation.
100%.
Alrighty. Well, we can just jump into the draft here. So, again, this one's probably going to be a pretty easy question, Chris, but I'm just going to ask it to you. Who would you take it to?
I'm no saucy takes, but you for sure got to take Dylan Harper at number 2. I think he just has the second most upside. There's Cooper Flag, and then there's Dylan Harper, and then the rest. But I think at this point in time, you don't know when you're going to get another number 2 pick in the Wemby era. And so if you're picking number 2 right now, you got to take a player like Dylan Harper because you never know what that could be. And if you question the fit, I still say you got to take Dylan Harper just so you can evaluate what that looks like. And then you can make a move from there if someone does not fit.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on trading down potentially? Are you even do you even think that that's something that we should consider, or are you just all in on Dylan Harper?
I mean, with the Spurs, I think anything is possible. You saw the Rob Dillingham trade. I think if there is like a package you can't refuse, like I know we've seen some Nets fans draw up some
Hmm.
trade packages where they're really unloading it for the number 2 pick. I think if there's like a package like that where you can really finesse the Nets first round picks or something like that, you got to take a look at that. But I think you stand pat unless it's just an offer you can't resist.
Who are some guys at 14 that you have an eye on?
I haven't done too much of a deep dive into 14. I've been looking at Dylan Harper at 2 for the most part, but I think just the top 2 wings, you have Rasheer Fleming and Carter Bryant for my top 2. Um, I haven't really done a deep dive into much of them, but I know Rasheer Fleming, he has some size and he can block a couple shots. I don't know if he's much of a like lockdown defender. I don't know if I would say that, but someone who could definitely get some size in that front court, maybe play a 3 or 4. Just a wing in general. That's what I would
Gotcha.
take.
Gotcha. Anything, Ethan?
No, sir.
Alrighty. Well, here's an interesting question. Do you think the Spurs will use both of those first picks? Or first round picks, to clarify.
I do think they will use them unless you're trading for a Kevin Durant. I think if you're trying to go and trade for Kevin Durant, you package the 14 pick and maybe make the money match with like a Harrison Barnes, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and then you go ahead and get your Kevin Durant. But if you're not trading for a star like that, then I think they will use both picks. But what could be interesting is looking at that 38 pick with Maxime. I think that's how you say his name, the French big man. Um, I don't know if he will fall to pick number 38. So I think a good move would be to package up some of those second round picks that what's his name? Brian Wright loves, and maybe move up so you can get Maxime and have him plug into that center spot.
Hmm.
I really like that take. One of the things that I didn't know as much about Maxime, like I knew I was looking at his on-court stuff, but I didn't realize that him and Victor are like chess best friends,
Yeah.
apparently. So I definitely think that that would be somebody that the Spurs might be willing to kind of, like you said, package all those excess second round picks up. Whether it be, in a 3-team trade or just a straight up where we kind of give some team, a second round pick haul. I mean, think about it. Didn't we get 4 picks when we traded for Devontae
Devontae
Graham?
Graham. Yeah. Yeah. I keep saying Derek White. Brian Wright, he loves his second round picks. So, we got a stash full of those. He can't resist.
And we're not going to use all of those. So
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But to just ask you another question here. So if we trade 14, for example, you think that's a KD trade? You don't think that maybe, and to be honest with you, I agree with you. But just for the sake of conversation, you don't think that they'll do something like they did with Rob Dillingham and just trade out, for future picks?
Well, I do think that's always a possibility. I think that would be last case scenario though. If the Spurs really just see someone who they don't believe in like they did last year, then you could possibly get a good trade like that, which looking back at the Rob Dillingham trade, I think that was a phenomenal trade. I would say fleece the Timberwolves. Obviously, we don't know what Rob Dillingham is going to be yet, but just from looking at it as of right now, that was a beautiful trade. And so, if the Spurs don't see anyone who they're in love with, you could possibly just trade back and get some future assets because the Spurs always love doing that.
Yeah. 100%. And yeah, the next question I had was free agency names. So we kind of talked a little bit about those already. Are there any others that you kind of have, Chris?
There is, you said Steven Adams. I think one sleeper could possibly be a Brook Lopez. I believe
Mm,
he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So him coming off the bench, he's a rim protector. He could stretch the floor. And so although he is on the older side, I do think you can get him on a cheaper deal. And I think he would fit that backup unit pretty well.
mm.
But then you could also run. I don't know if it would be redundant at that point if you wanted to run a Brook Lopez and Victor Wembanyama, but I think Wemby's just so skilled that he can really fit with anyone.
Very true. I think another name that people don't think about, but I think it might be less likely considering the run that they're on right now. Miles Turner is also an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah.
And he made 20 million last year.
Yeah, I had just seen a report where they said the Pacers will be willing to spend a little bit more money to bring him back, which makes sense. You
Yeah.
don't want to just mess up the team chemistry after that, but I think that would be a pretty good addition if the Spurs could somehow make that happen.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to the Nas Reed thing. Like I would love that. That was a name I thought about earlier too, but he even tweeted too, kind of when they were going into the Eastern Conference Finals. He was like, "This is the most fun I've ever had playing basketball." It seems like he loves the Pacers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with what they're doing, I mean, they're about to go to the finals, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't be mad at it. So it's kind of similar circumstances for those two, but I still definitely like that name, and I really like the Brook Lopez point. I hadn't heard that yet. And as much as he's a veteran, you know what I'm saying? You could say we're losing a vet in Chris Paul, so he could kind of replace that as much as, those guys still took everything, that they learned from CP3, but he's somebody who can stretch the floor and also, he has the modern fit because he's been able to develop the jump shot on top of just, being able to do all the paint stuff. And him off the bench as well, I think he's, because it's an older version of him, but I think him playing against other teams' benches, will mitigate whatever negatives you could say about him. Not saying he's going to be a perfect player, but him off the bench, those won't be as exacerbated.
Yeah, another one like Brook Lopez would probably be Al Horford. I don't know how realistic that is because he is a fan favorite over there in Boston, and I
Yeah.
don't think he would want to leave a winning situation like that. But if he does decide that he wants to play somewhere else, I think the Spurs should definitely take a look at that.
Yeah.
Only other name I had was Precious Achua. I don't know if he wants to leave New York right now. I think he's also injured, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but he's a guy that's very affordable, 6 years in the league, and is just like a high energy rebounding guy that we could probably use.
Yeah, like y'all said, just get us any big body,
Yeah,
really.
Kevon Looney.
Kevon Looney, yeah, and anyone. It's hard because, like I said, no one really goes into free agency nowadays. So
Yeah,
you just got to get what you can take if you're not trading for anyone.
good point.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, any final thoughts or final questions for you here? Because I got all my questions wrapped up. Ethan, if you got anything, please jump in. Yeah, but if you got any questions for us, we can kind of just wrap up this episode here.
I don't know if we've covered this already somewhat, but I would ask y'all, how would y'all, I believe y'all did ask me this, how would y'all balance the win now compared to the development of like a Blake Wesley or a Malachi Branham? Which would y'all prioritize more? Obviously, you want to win, but what are y'all leaning towards? What is the line in the sand where you would cut them off and try to win? If you know it.
Yeah, I think for those two guys specifically, you have to prioritize winning now. For a guy like Stephon Castle, obviously you want him to develop because he has a higher upside. Um, However, I'm with you with what you said at the very beginning. This is the final year, really, for most of these guys to prove that like they're a part of the long term, franchise and outlook as far as winning championships.
Yeah, if I'm gonna set the line for this year for Devin and Keldon, it's probably even higher for
Yeah.
guys like Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham, and that's not even to like write off their long term future. It's just with the way that the Spurs are kind of going, the direction that they're moving in, there just might not. It might be better to have somebody who's a little bit more of a sure thing, who's willing to come on a vet minimum, where if you do have an injury, they can come in and just immediately produce. Like this is something that's just popping into my mind because I saw him in the playoffs and I was like, I mean, I knew he was still in the league, but it was just wild with some of the Magic's injuries. Like Corey Joseph was out there still playing. And like, would you, you know what I mean? Would you be down to bring Kojo back, to be your third string point guard behind De'Aaron and Dylan Harper? You know what I mean? And he would be somebody in an injury situation where he could come in, run the Spurs offense. There's not all these young guy mistakes. You know what I mean? Obviously, the system's changed a little bit, and Pop's not the head coach anymore. But I think you kind of get what I'm getting at there. That's somebody who would be much more easier to plug and play in the wake of injuries, which are definitely going to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you would think he's a little bit older, but he's only like 32 or 33. Corey Joseph, he's still a little young, so he's got some juice left.
Yeah, there's a couple names like that. Patty Mills is also an unrestricted free agent. He's older, obviously, but he's a guy that can get you a couple threes in a timely fashion, and be the third string point guard. And another name that's probably going to make too much money, but I really like, kind of a similar mold to Blake, but just more of a sure thing, is Dennis Schroeder, who's also an unrestricted free agent.
Oh, that's a sleeper. I didn't even think of Schroeder, but
I
yeah, no, I
love me
definitely.
some Dennis Schroeder.
You got the international connection there too.
We do.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with y'all though. Yeah, they have a shorter leash for sure.
Yeah, like I said, anything else, Chris, that you got?
That would be all for me. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Anything from you, Ethan?
No, man, that's it for me. I appreciate you coming on, dude. It's cool to meet people that kind of do something similar to us and have an honest conversation, because, I live up in Dallas and not everybody knows any, Manu Ginobili, Matt Bonner, so it's fun to have a conversation with somebody else that is like-minded, other than Jude, of course, who I have the pleasure of talking to every week.
No, for sure. Likewise. I appreciate y'all for having me. It's been a blast. Anytime y'all want to talk basketball, I'll be here for sure.
Yeah, man, absolutely. We'll have to make this, just a regular thing, whether it's once a month, once every 2 months, especially when the season starts, just to get your perspective on everything. Because, like Ethan said, we love talking to each other, but it's nice to have somebody else, and to just get their perspective on things. And man, I don't know if this was when we started recording or if this was before we started the show, but when you came in here and we're talking about Dom Beasy and Drew Eubanks. Look, that's all you got to do to make me and Ethan happy.
That's right.
And that's really what I think the Spurs should do long term. We should focus our backcourt or our backup front court. We should focus that on Drew Eubanks and Dom Barlow. You see this? Let me pull up the graphic. You see these empty spaces? Okay, they're gonna get filled, and the physicality and the paint is gonna get fixed. And Dominic Barlow is gonna come back as a 40% 3-point shooter in modern four.
No, not a bad idea. I know you're joking, but if worse comes to worse, go out there and just go get you Don Barlow. Be the backup center. Something.
Yo, low key though, actually, Eubanks would have helped us last year.
He would have.
In all seriousness,
he helps everyone.
Yeah.
As much as I'm joking about that, I'm realizing I'm like, actually, you know what? I would be pretty open to Eubanks coming back as the third string center.
For sure.
Shoot, even the backup. But again, man, Chris, we appreciate you so much, man. Again, we just kind of want to give you the floor here at the end, to just plug everything that you're doing. Y'all go follow him or subscribe, at Spurs Spotlight. The link is in the title as well as in the description. And yeah, Chris, the floor's yours, man.
No, of course. Well, thank you to Jude and Ethan for having me on. Like you said, go ahead and subscribe. Spurs Spotlight on YouTube, Spurs Spotlight on X. So yeah, if you love Spurs, you like SSPN, we kind of do something similar over there. So be sure to check it out. But like I said, I appreciate Jude and Ethan. And that's all I got. I appreciate y'all.
All righty, Chris. We appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate y'all for hanging out with us today. And if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the channel, follow us on X or Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero, as well as at Spurs Spotlight and Chris as well. Y'all go subscribe to him. We appreciate Chris for coming on. We'll catch y'all next week.